Good evening. This is 2020 Church, and I'm Pastor Larry Enriquez. You know, we're in our Lenten season, and because of that, we're preparing our hearts and minds for the celebration of the resurrection of Christ. And of course, there's no resurrection without death. So that said, we're going to do what we call a simple soup supper. We do that 4 weeks before Easter to kind of commemorate the simplicity of life and our need to slow down. To help us do that today is our friend and longtime sister in Christ, Leslie Egge.
Hello.
And she's going to be giving us a recipe for chicken tortilla soup without the chicken today that she does. And of course, her husband Cliff helped buy all these, and he's not in the camera, but we need to make mention of Cliff because some of his labor is in this as well. Yes. So you're representing Cliff, is that right?
That's right.
Okay, good.
That's right.
So we're going to start with a prayer in just a moment, but let me get back to the Lenten season. Lenten season is that season that came, and it just means spring, that came to, again, allow us to really focus on what our lives are about, and our lives are nothing without the resurrection of Christ, but our lives are everything in full because of Christ's resurrection. And so we really want to slow down during this time of the year to kind of help us slow down throughout life. So it's not just, let's just do this one time and then we're slowed down. We just want to try to do good habits, because good habits are what make up a good life. So a good habit would be to slow down. So cooking a simple soup is part of our need to slow down.
Yep.
Is that right?
That's right.
We're busy, we're harried, and we're doing things quick, and you know, and sometimes we don't. I mean, how many fast food restaurants are there? We went to we were on a little vacation for 5 days up north, and it was really wonderful. But there was no shortage of places to eat. I mean, there are just restaurants everywhere, and so you don't have to cook, but I guess now things are so expensive. Maybe you do have to cook, but you can't even get out of the grocery store without spending a whole lot of money.
That's right. That's right.
But this is one of those simple soups that isn't a whole lot of money, because it's charged with some good things, and there are some still good things that aren't expensive, like some vegetables we're going to look at. Actually, one of those things we call a vegetable. 3 of them are actually fruits. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Actually, a lot of those are fruits.
Yes.
Anyway. So we'll get to that. Okay, so Leslie, let's look at this. By the way, this is on top of our stove. So we're going to cut here so you can see it better, and then we'll get to cooking in a little bit. But it starts off with a kind of semi-moi-pois. A moi-pois is a French word for the base of all kinds of cooking in French cooking, which generally includes 1 part carrot to 1 part celery to 2 parts onion. But this is a kind of a take on that. It's called a sofrito, which is the base of a lot of Latin cooking. And we're going to use, for our sofrito, we're going to use a carrot and
onion.
I'm sorry, yeah, an onion and garlic. And the carrot, which is generally part of that, will come in later as part of the bigger vegetable we're going to eat. So anyway, so quickly, Leslie, how do you do garlic? How do you open it up? You smack it like that, huh? Take some of your aggression out?
Yes.
That way you don't have to hit your husband
I
when
thought you were going to do this part.
Yeah, I'm going to see how you do it, and then we'll tell you how to do it right.
I need a knife. Cut that off for me.
Well, you just can just kind of push it down a little bit. Hold it.
And then I just pull
then
out 2
it just
pieces.
pulls apart, right?
This is requiring just 2 cloves of garlic.
Yeah. There's one. And I like garlic, so we're going to use 2 big ones.
Okay.
We're going to do that. And then
usually I just take a knife.
I love what's called a bench scraper. It's really one of my most favorite tools, because I can actually cut with this, but I actually can also clean with this. So we're going to do that. Like this.
Your little trash bin.
That's right. I always have one of those, what we call a trash bowl, or maybe we should call it trash, but we're not going to use bowl, so we do that. These are little packs. Put that over here.
And then you can just squish,
and I'll do
cut that up. Thank you.
Yeah, and you just smash it like this.
Yeah.
Right? And then this comes off really easy. Just like that. And we're going to mince this up, correct?
Yeah, we're just going to chop it up and put it in our pan with our oil, and it's going to brown.
Oops. By the way, there's no trickery here. We're just going to do real cooking, and there's no hidden cameras or delays or anything like that. But you want to cut this up, or?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Well, we're
I'll
gonna.
watch you. You're teaching
all right.
me to do
We're
it
gonna
the right way.
We're gonna do it like that. And then we're gonna take it like this. Oops. And just do that.
Perfect.
Yeah. Just a reminder, it's good to hold a knife like this. So it's balanced.
This is our family's recipe for tortilla soup, and we actually got this from an old friend of ours I needed to add some more sauces to it because I liked it really thinner than it was. So we'll put that in there with
You
our
like it
grease.
thinner? What do you
I like to thin it out so that there's a lot of juice. It was more like a soupy.
It was
kind
more
of thick.
stewish.
Yeah, real thick.
Than it was soupish.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's our
First.
our garlic. Now, what we normally do in cooking is that we put the garlic in after the onion starts going, so you don't want to burn your garlic ever because it'll become bitter.
Okay.
Always cut your onion when you're doing dicing from point to point. So you're doing that, and then you just take off the ends like this. Hang on. And again, we use our famous, we're going to make it famous, bench scraper. And then we do the peeling. I suppose we could have did this in advance, but...
It's good to watch.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the simple things that we do all the time, we just take it for granted. We don't show people how to do it better.
Yeah.
And you already have good ways to do it, but if you don't, maybe we can give you some tips. Okay. Hang on.
And there are ways, in case you get a lot of tears, there are ways you can put your onion in the refrigerator beforehand, or you can take a wet paper towel and put it at your site when you're chopping it, and that absorbs the onion. So right now we might be crying, so we'll see.
Yeah, it's actually the gas from the onion that gets you, and if you cool it, then the gases don't come up the same. So we're going to dice this. So this onions already have layers, so you don't have to cut this like that. Like they used to teach that in culinary school, but they don't do that anymore. Now you just come like this, and then you just do this.
Beautiful.
Wow. And that goes in there like that. And then,
Professional way.
and then this the same thing. Like that. Like that. And then you just cut it like this. Are your eyes crying yet?
Not yet. Not yet. Are yours? I'm going to stand right back here. Okay.
Good. So there you have the
Great.
base of the soup. That's pretty inexpensive so far. I don't know how much an onion costs, but there are stores where you can get it fairly inexpensive. Stores you can get it expensive, so it's up to you. But generally speaking, these are not expensive deals. So we would put a little olive oil inside the pan,
Yes.
just about like, you tell me when.
That's good.
Okay, that's about three tablespoons.
Okay. And then we would add our onion.
We'd put that on the flame, and then once that gets heated up, then we would put in the onion.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
So,
And then the garlic.
let's put this. Let's
Over
put
the
this.
side?
Let's
Okay.
put this aside for now,
Okay.
and let's cut the other vegetables we're going to get pretty soon.
Okay.
In fact, take
so,
that off.
Before we put more vegetables in this, Larry,
Yeah.
we will add all of our juices to it and let it. Okay?
Yeah, and we'll talk about that when we
Okay.
actually do it.
Okay.
So,
these are the vegetables that we're going to be using for our.
Okay. So this is a squash, a zucchini squash. This is called the chayote. It's CHAYOTE. Chayote. It's usually used in Hispanic cooking, and this is a summer squash and carrots. So these are your vegetables inside the soup.
Right.
Yeah. These technically, like your tomato,
Yes.
are fruits.
Okay.
We eat them like vegetables, but they're fruits. What's the difference? I'm not an expert at this stuff, but I know this, that fruits come out of the flower. So if there's a flowering plant, the flower that turns into a edible commodity is a fruit. Anything else out of that plant would be a vegetable. So these are fruits because these come out of the flower. Anyway, that said, maybe that's not important to you, but the point is that for many people in Mexican cooking, they'll actually peel the chayote. You don't do that, which is great because if you
skin, there's a lot more vitamins in the skin. So you just clean it well.
Right. So this you're going to cut just like that, and inside you're going to find almost like a substance that would be something like a pear. So it's a seed. So you're going to cut it again like that, and then you just cut it off like this.
Right.
And that's pretty easy. I've seen people try to core these, and I'm thinking, hey, you don't need to do that. Just cut it like that. So you're quartering the chayote, and then you're going to cut the middle off.
I like to keep the skin on it because it is more of a firmer vegetable or fruit when you have it in your soup. And then the inside is a good texture of softness.
Yeah. And there's vitamins in the actual skin, correct? Yeah. So anyway, so this is however you want to cut it. Yeah. These because this end is small, I just cut that like that already, and then I cut it like that, and then I cut these like that.
Right.
So that would be how you do that. Again, that's already small, and then this you would cut in half, and then you would cut that. So we wouldn't have to cut them all on camera, but that's how you would do the chayote. And then the same with the summer squash. Take the end off.
On this end.
Then you keep them half round?
I do.
Okay. So you
keep everything about the same size so it cooks evenly.
Right. Okay. That'll be that. And carrots, if you wash them, you don't need to peel them.
Yeah.
So I do them like this. I go right about there. I do that because these are smaller. So you just that would be your carrot.
And then here's your
and you have your summer squash.
And I just have that and then the same, like a zucchini.
Right. One more time.
Looks healthy already, doesn't it?
Good. Now again, we're doing this Simple Soup Suppers, so you learn how to cook something for your soup. Okay. So these would be all the vegetables we're going to put in on top of the liquid that goes in after we cook down the onion and the garlic.
Yes.
Okay. So of course you have 2 carrots, correct?
I do. And more squash.
And you have one whole chayote, and then you have a summer squash, and a zucchini.
Yeah.
So that's the ingredients. In case you don't have a pen, well, if you have a pen or pencil, you can write it down. We can post it, or just go back and watch it again. Okay. So that's all of our stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. Praise God.
You just have our liquids and our spices.
All right, and we'll get to that in just a moment.
Okay.
Let's start the actual cooking of the soup.
Okay.
So here we're back with a cleared off oven space, or rather stove space, and we're going to start cooking the soup. So we have the onions here. We would put in the onions into the olive oil. We have I would say there's about 3 tablespoons of olive oil in there. And then we're going to cook that just for about just so it gets a little bit transparent, so you can see through the onion a little bit, and then we put in the garlic at that same time. And then we've done that already. Then we're going to do a little bit of salt. It's really important, in my opinion, to layer as you go along, so you season everything properly. Then you have some pepper, and you cook that down a little bit. Let me use this ladle. And then once this cooks down, we start with some liquids, correct?
Yes, we do.
So we have some
chicken broth.
That's right. The whole thing?
Yes, the whole thing.
Okay. So you have 32 ounces of chicken broth. Now, when would the chicken go in?
Chicken would go in after the onions and the garlic, and we would put chicken in there, and then we would brown it. So that would cook for about 20 minutes before you put in your liquids. But we're making it vegetarian today, so.
Well, I wouldn't call it vegetarian because
it does have chicken broth. Hey.
But we just don't have chicken here.
And we only want to do half of this. We want to do 12 ounces
so
of
12 ounces?
Yeah, so do half of that.
Okay.
Is 12
and this
ounces.
is vegetable juice?
Vegetable juice.
Okay.
That's good.
You got that?
And then we will do a big fat can of stewed tomatoes.
These are diced tomatoes.
Yeah, diced stewed tomatoes.
So there you go. Now, once we do that, this kind of these ingredients need salt.
Yes.
So you're gonna have to
we
salt that up,
and then we put in 2 cups of water.
No, why that?
Because that adds more juice to it.
Why don't you just put in more vegetables?
And you can add in more vegetables. Well, I use water because that's what it calls for.
Okay.
So
all right.
that's my recipe.
Okay.
And I'm sticking to it.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Now, at this point is when I do spices. So I use ground cayenne pepper, and you know what? We did forget one main ingredient, and that is a jalapeno.
Okay.
So usually I will do the jalapeno in there.
Like you dice it?
Yeah, I dice it.
And it goes in with the
It goes in with the,
sofrito.
I
Okay.
did have a jalapeno.
So it's all right. Well,
Okay, so then we add some cayenne pepper.
If you go back to the onion and the garlic, you would dice up a
jalapeno. Yes.
All right. And then how much do you put it, like a teaspoon?
I do about a teaspoon. I just shake it in.
Okay.
And then I'll always taste.
And this is always to how hot you want it.
How hot you want it. And
well, there's
then,
about a teaspoon of that in there, or two teaspoons.
same with chili powder.
Chili powder.
Yes.
This isn't hot, but it's depth of flavor.
Yes.
And so you want to put that in there like that.
Same thing.
Hang on. Okay.
Good. And then ground cumin, and I usually do about 2 teaspoons of ground cumin in there. It gives it that real kind of Mexican flavor, you know.
Well, I use a lot of cumin. Some people don't like it so much, but if you don't eat here.
Yeah. Then more salt and pepper.
Okay.
More salt and pepper.
Salt and pepper?
And then actually, I will use some sugar because the sugar takes away the bitterness of the tomato sometimes.
Well, what it does,
And it kind of,
it neutralizes the acid.
It neutralizes the acid. So I use some sugar.
Okay.
And then I let this cook for probably about an hour. I let it simmer. So it gets all the flavors in, and before I put my vegetables in. So we're going to assume it's an hour?
Yeah. Well, no, we can do it later.
Okay.
Yeah. What we can do is just let you know that once this simmers for about an hour or reduces for about an hour, do you do it covered or uncovered?
I do it covered.
Okay, so you're not reducing too much because it's keeping the steam in.
Right.
But you're melting all the flavors, and then you put in all the vegetables that we cut.
Yes.
And they all go in there.
Right.
And then you have an ingredient that I never buy it. I go, who would use like
canned tomatoes.
Canned potatoes. Yeah, who would use that? And you would. And actually, I've had your soup, and I love it. Yeah. So here's an application I wasn't familiar with, but it's just already cooked boiled potatoes. You could actually just do your own potatoes. You would just put it in when you put all the vegetables in.
Yeah,
but it'll cook at the same speed. But this would be at
the end.
About 10 minutes. You're just going to heat those up.
Yeah, 10 minutes before you're ready to serve it. You put your potatoes in.
And you season it. You would season again. Okay.
And then, so would you
all right.
like a bowl of the finished product?
Well, we will in a while.
Okay.
But let's take this off the stove,
Okay.
and let's just have a little instruction that is something that this reminds us of. When we do simple soup suppers, again, the point isn't just. I mean, there's plenty of cooking shows out there, and we're not a cooking show, but we certainly are showing you something about cooking to inspire you to slow down, to do some cooking, to remind ourselves of Christ. In the Bible, there's so much about food. In fact, one of the commandments that we're given to reveal, in practice, or rather to show in practice our salvation, is the communion meal or the communion implements, where we celebrate the death of Jesus and his resurrection by taking bread and wine. And that was often done around a meal. So that's the idea of, again, looking at to really what gives us the fullness of life, and that is Jesus, because Jesus says he is the bread of life. So when we take together and eat together, we're reminded of who Christ is, that he's our fulfillment, that he's our sustenance, that he's the one who gives us all that we need to live. Certainly he gives us food. He says he'll take care of us and gives us food to eat. And that's why we practice prayers before we eat. It's just a good time to say thank you, Jesus, for our food. And we use the time of prayer before food to remind us of that. But the deeper thing is Jesus says that he ultimately is the bread of life. We could read in the scriptures. Okay, I'm going to move out of camera just for a little bit, or at least the side of the camera. But here, let me put this here like this. Now, that's good. But here in John chapter 6 is a wonderful story of Jesus feeding 5,000 plus people with very little. The story tells us that Jesus crosses over the Sea of Galilee. He's with his disciples, and there's a huge crowd who are following Jesus at this time because they want to partake in his miracle. They want to see his miracles, and they certainly love when Jesus does a miracle that involves more food or more wine. Jesus is there. Let's go to the party. He's going to feed us. So it comes time when they're on this hillside, and it's about dinner time, and then Jesus asks him a question that he already knows the answer to, Leslie. Do you know what the question was? Do you remember the question?
How are we going to feed these people?
Yeah, how are we going to feed them? Mm-hmm. How are we going to feed these people? So it's actually dinner time, and Jesus already knows the answer. The Bible tells us that. But he asked them because he's testing them. And maybe that's always the test for us. When there's something that comes up that seems impossible or seems outside of our ability to do something, the Lord will always ask you, well, how are you going to do that? How are you going to handle that? Yeah. And I hope we come to the reality that Jesus is asking us a question he already has an answer to. So we can go, okay, Jesus, I'm going to fulfill this, whatever this is. It could be a job. It could be a relationship. It could be anything that just seems outside of your ability to fix. So whatever the issue is that you don't have an answer to, Jesus has an answer. What the Lord wants us to do is go to him, just like a good parent wants their children to come to them. Because we want to help them. We think we know something. We've been around the block or whatever. And I think the Lord is like that. He wants us to come to him and ask him, how do we fix this thing that seems unfixable to me? So they went to Jesus, and turning to Philip, Jesus asked Philip, where can we buy bread to feed all these people? And it says he was asking Philip to test him. And Philip replies, we don't have the money to feed them all. Somebody says, well, you know what? It was, I think Peter said, there's this little boy who has these little loaves of bread, 5 barley loaves and 2 dried fish. It really was the lunch of a poor person, of a poor child. They're little like sardinish, they're little cakes. It's like nothing. But it doesn't tell us here, but what's really important to understand, they didn't go just take this food from the kid. the kid had to give it to them. The child had to be willing to partake by saying, here, I have this. And it's a beautiful part of the story. Sometimes I think we forget that there needs to be this sense of, Lord, here's what I have. What will you do with this?
Use it.
And that's what God does. He uses what we have. Whatever little it is that we might have is a lot that God can do with. And so it goes on to speak of feeding these 5,000 plus people with these barley loaves and with the little dried fish, that they're all fed, and there's now baskets left over from all of the feeding of the people. There's so much that God has done beyond what they could ever imagine or do. Now, a little bit further down in the book of the Gospel according to John chapter 6, I think it's like in verse, we could start in verse 30, where they're asking Jesus to show us more miracles. But Jesus says, Moses didn't give it to them, my Father did. What's he talking about? The manna. When they were fed in the wilderness, Jesus goes back to that, and he's saying to them that Moses was fed, or rather was feeding the people, not by something he created, but what God had given him to give them, the manna that was from heaven. Jesus goes on to say that I am that manna. He goes, I am the bread of life. He goes on to say, I am the bread of life. I am the one who will give you everything you need to live this life here and the life after. So when Jesus feeds the 5,000 plus people, it's a sign. It's not just a miracle, it's a sign. It's pointing towards the reality that Jesus Christ is the one who gives us everything that we need with all of our issues and problems that come through life, and then gives us what we need mostly at the end of life, when we're the most sick. It's called death. We have no answer to death. Lord, here's a dilemma. What do I do with death? And Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. He's the bread of life and the one who gives us life, even after we die. When Jesus said, I'm the bread of life, like here, or when he said he's the resurrection and the life, they didn't like hearing that, frankly. People don't like hearing that. When Jesus said that, it says that they murmured. And they said, nah, this can't be real. Because this is Jesus. We know his family. But it is real. It really is who Christ is. He is the resurrection of the life. He is the bread of life. And so, whatever it is that comes and says to you, no, it can't be, it's just one of those lies that was a lie back then. People just didn't like to hear that Jesus had the power of life over death. But that's what Jesus claims, and we believe it. Well, that said, to further look at this idea of Jesus being the bread of life, we're going to kind of close by finishing the soup and then giving you a bread to commemorate the fact that Christ is the bread of life. It's called a tortilla. It's just made with flour and water and a little lipid of choice and a little salt and etc. So quickly, there's all kinds of recipes out there, I'm sure, but generally I get 3 cups of flour. I get a teaspoon of baking powder, which is a leavening agent. You don't want it rising, but it gives it a little bit of depth. And then a teaspoon of salt, about a third of a cup of olive oil, but you can use just about any kind of oil or lard even. But I use extra virgin olive oil, a third of a cup. And then I use about a cup of warm water, and that makes my dough.
Okay.
It's wet. It's raining today, so I might add a little more flour than I do water because it's moist or whatever. So I get a little flour and I put it on the board, and then I make little balls from the big lump. I grew up with my mom making tortillas almost every day. My mom was a good cook, and she would make tortillas like this. So let me see if I can. Leslie, is there underneath there's a it as a pin. Yeah, that'll work. So,
It's a flower on it.
yeah. So we're going to do this. Going to make a little bit of a tortilla. By the way, there's a rolling pin I usually use that I don't have out. I don't want to take time to get it, but
Put some more flour on it.
yeah. There's all this flour on the board. These are really fun to make. By the way, if you have kids, they'll have fun making them too with you. Or grandkids like myself. So okay. So that's a very rustic tortilla. But that would be the flatbread of the Mexican culture, or even the Spanish culture have their tortillas. But we would make a bunch of these. So you can get a cast iron pan or a Teflon pan, whatever you want. We have this little thing called a comal. It's just a flat cast iron piece, and I just put my tortillas on there like this and heat them up. Actually, it's more than heating up, it's actually going to cook it a little bit. We use our fingers, but you can use any kind of a tool that helps you lift it. Another one of my favorite tools is this particular kind of spatula. I have favorite tools. So we'll let it cook, and you can tell when it's
Starting to get cooked.
yeah,
Puffs up.
when it's ready to turn. Yeah, start getting little bubbles like that, and that's what it does. So we'll turn it just a bit. You want to turn it?
I can turn it.
Okay.
Is it ready?
I think so. Yeah, there we go. Yep. And we're gonna have our first tortilla. Now, growing up, we didn't grow up with bread. We grew up with tortillas. So I would go to school with burritos and feel embarrassed because no one else had burritos. So people would want to trade me for my burritos, and I wanted their sandwich because I wanted to feel like I was more like them. It's kind of odd how that is, you know.
Yeah.
Now I go, that was silly, but our brains are these weird things when we're young.
Now we wish somebody would make us a burrito
I
for
know.
lunch, right?
And so I grew up, learning to be a little bit embarrassed about, how we ate, because it was different than most of my friends. So this tortilla is done.
Okay.
So I'm gonna turn off this heating source, but that's the tortilla.
Nice little
You wanna-
tortilla.
It's a little hot, but you can kind of get the sense of that tortilla.
Very thick.
Yeah,
Nice.
and sometimes we would put we put butter on it, or we'd have peanut butter on this
Oh.
and jelly and roll it up. And that was our peanut butter and jelly sandwich. That's how we ate it.
Wow.
But we had tortillas almost every day, so I still make them to this day myself. Anyway, that said, Jesus is the what?
Bread of life.
The tortilla of life.
Oh, the tortilla of life. The flour of life.
Jesus is your sustenance if you let him be. He's our sustenance. He's the one who keeps us. He's the one who takes care of us and who takes care of us even when the worst things come. He's there to give us answers. Make sure you ask Jesus. He has an answer for you, just like he had an answer for those who said, how do we feed the 5,000? Jesus has an answer for your problem. I hope you ask him. God bless you. We hope to see you this Sunday at 1791 East Holt Boulevard in Ontario, Suite 104 and 105. That's CCF. Thank you for being with us.
Is it time to
Leslie.
eat? Is it time to
It's-
eat?
you
Would
know
you like
what?
to see a bowl of soup?
You know what? Yeah.
I'll fix you a bowl really
Okay,
quick,
let's
okay?
do that.
And here we are ready to have some soup. Put a little bit of broth in there. And then we want to use some toppings of cheese, some cilantro. And I usually take a couple chips and I just kind of crunch them up. Put some avocado on the top and squeeze a lemon. Here we go. Bon appetit.